each of them had a narrative. On Fox, it was America's liberation of the oppressed Iraqi people. And on Al Jazeera, it was a continuing humiliation of the Arabs. I remember there was one scene I first saw actually on CNN. There was a retired American general in a turtleneck who was showing a clip of 2 American soldiers who were evacuating a home. And the general explained to the television audience, notice the placement, the proper way in which they stand on either side of the door as the father opens up the door, and you can see his family all around him, and they're made to come outside. Notice the proper placement of the soldiers' hands on their, the outside of the trigger guard of their weapons, he says, ignoring the faces of 3 little girls whose eyes are so wide with fright. It's as if they could explode. Notice the way the soldiers have taken control of the situation, he says, as the family is made to kneel in front of the Americans. Now, it's one thing to see this on CNN. It's another to watch it on Al Jazeera, where this scene was captured and rebroadcast again and again because it expressed so poignantly the theme of the war from the Arab perspective. This sense of humiliation is augmented by pervasive feelings of weakness and dependency. Imagine living in a culture where everything that you touch is made somewhere else. Your screwdrivers or your coffee, for instance. Saudi Arabia once noted for its coffee. Now when you go get a cup of coffee, you go to Starbucks. And you have to order in English or Urdu. Even if you're a terrorist, your weapons are made in China or Russia or the US. Nothing that your culture has put its hands on comes from itself. Just take the example of the number of patents. One American company like IBM owns 38,000 patents. In the country of Syria, the entire country of Syria, there are only 10 patents. The usual measures of cultural excellence, like Nobel Prize winners or Olympic champions, are practically absent in the Muslim world. That's one reason that bin Laden's voice sounds so loud. There are so few heroes and cultural models. Now, it's my belief that this cycle of humiliation turns itself into a longing for revenge. Bin Laden had an object in attacking America. He wanted to draw America into Afghanistan, thinking that we could replicate the mistake that the Soviet Union made. You remember when 1979 the Soviets went into Afghanistan, spent 10 years bleeding into the Afghan soil, and what happened? When the Soviets withdrew, the Soviet Union fell apart. Bin Laden actually believes that it was he and his Arab mujahideen who really contributed nothing to that war. He believes that they inflicted the wound that destroyed the Soviet Union, and he thinks that he could have done the same thing to the United States, that the United States could become the disunited states. And that would leave room for Islam to regain its natural place in the world. Well, he miscalculated. It took only a few weeks, and 410 members of special forces combined with the Afghan troops and massive American firepower to sweep aside the Taliban, pummel Al-Qaeda. If you read Al-Qaeda's internal memoranda, they talk about the fact that 80% of Al-Qaeda was captured or killed in November, December 2001. The war on terror was over. Al-Qaeda, yes, the leaders got away, but they were scattered, they were unable to communicate with each other, they were impoverished, they were repudiated all over the world, including the Muslim world. It was Iraq that brought that movement back to life. It was Iraq that breathed life into it. It allowed Al-Qaeda to find a new cause and a new country to train in. It also allowed the Taliban to suddenly have a breathing room to regenerate in Afghanistan. Now, Al-Qaeda in its new form is no longer the Al-Qaeda that we knew. As early as 1998, Al-Qaeda strategists had planned for the day when Al-Qaeda would have to reshape itself and no longer be the top-down hierarchical organization that bin Laden, the business student, had created. An organization where, for instance, you had to sign a form in triplicate to get a spare tire, but also an organization that provided health benefits, a month-long paid vacation. Al-Qaeda was a good job for a lot of guys. But the internal leaders of Al-Qaeda knew that that couldn't last, that eventually that would be destroyed. So they set about designing a different kind of Al-Qaeda, one that would be more horizontal in its leadership, shaped more like street gangs. This is what you saw in Madrid. It's what you saw in London. These groups have few, if any, real-life connection with each other, but they're tied together by the internet, which offers them a safe place to conspire. But more important than the virtual world for Al-Qaeda, nothing substitutes for real-life training, which is why those training camps in Al-Qaeda, those sanctuaries, were so important. It allowed Al-Qaeda to create networks and training that made it into this global enterprise. But now, I just told you that in 2001, Al-Qaeda was essentially destroyed. Now we see Al-Qaeda regenerated. We see Al-Qaeda present in countries where it wasn't really present before 9/11. We see it having sanctuaries in Somalia and Mali, and for several years in the Sunni areas of Iraq, probably once again in Afghanistan, and certainly in the tribal areas of Pakistan, deeply rooted in these countries. How has it been able to achieve this? In 1998, Abu Bakr Naji, one of Al-Qaeda's chief strategists, published his masterwork on the internet called The Management of Savagery. In there, he outlines a bold and unconventional plan. Jihadists should strike at the industrial and tourist areas of African and Arab countries, he says. This will cause the government to concentrate its forces on the vital areas, leaving the periphery unprotected. And in those areas, Al-Qaeda can create chaos through the use of barbarous behavior. This is Al-Qaeda's strategy. When people are in terror, when they are living in a chaotic situation, they will turn to the strongest force for protection, even if it's the force that caused that chaos in the first place. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the late leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, took the management of savagery to a whole new level when he cut off the head of an American contractor and posted a video of it on the internet, and then began his campaign of bombing Shiite mosques while worshippers were at prayer, purposely trying to instigate an Islamic civil war. In 2005, Fuad Hussein, in his biography of Zarqawi, produced the most definitive outline of Al-Qaeda's master plan. It's fascinating to read this document now and see how, in some ways, events have hewed very closely to Al-Qaeda's forecasts, and in others, you can see where Al-Qaeda has failed to achieve its goals. According to Hussein, Al-Qaeda formulated a 20-year plan beginning on 9/11, a stage he calls the awakening. Hussein writes that by striking America, the head of the serpent, Al-Qaeda would cause the U.S. to lose consciousness and act chaotically against those who attacked it. This first stage ended in 2003 when American troops entered Baghdad. Now that American forces were drawn into the Middle East, the second eye-opening stage began.